So it's worth doing a quick review about the construction of a 5/7 chord. So when you talk about the 5/7 chord that can serve as a dominant seventh chord, we of course are always going to be talking about a major, minor, seventh, and that's going to apply to both major keys and minor keys. So let's just quickly construct ourselves a major, minor, seventh chord based on the fifth scale degree in a major key, in this case the key of F major, and then also in a minor key. So in order to do that, we want to make sure that we remember that a major, minor, seventh chord is going to have a major triad as the underlying triad. Then of course we're going to add a minor seventh to that to turn it into that, to account for that minor part of the major, minor, seventh chord. So we'll start with the key of F, okay? So just to give us a sense of the tonicization, here's F major. So we'll take that key and we'll create a 5 chord first, and then we'll turn that into a 5/7. So a 5 chord is going to be a triad based on the fifth scale degree of F. The fifth scale degree of F, of course, is C. Okay, let me try that a little bit neater. So there's the C, the root of our chord, and then what I'll do is I'll put the chordal fifth in the tenor, the chordal third I'll put in the alto, and then I will double the root of the chord in the soprano. So there is my 5 chord. Okay, so again in the key of F, I've now constructed a 5 chord here. Okay, and now I'm going to enhance the dominant function of this 5 chord by turning it into a 5/7, which means one of these 4 voices has to leave its current position and go to the chordal 7th. I don't want to do that with the bass because it's forming the root of my chord, and just for the sake of clarity, I want to go ahead and leave things in root position for now. I don't want to do it with the tenor in this case because the tenor is holding on to the 5th, and in the interest of creating a complete chord, I want to leave that 5th in place. The same rationale leads me to not want to do anything with the alto either. I want to keep that chordal 3rd. So I'll go to the soprano, which in fact is doubling the root of the chord, and since it's kind of covering a note that's already been covered, I think that's a safe one to move. So I'll take that soprano note, and instead of making it a C, we'll move it down a whole step to a B flat. Now I know that it's a B flat because that pitch is specified in the key signature, but again, for the sake of clarity, just to make sure I'm being as thorough as possible, I'll go ahead for my own good and just put a flat next to that B. And now I've turned that 5 chord into a 5/7 chord. So again, I'll tonicize the key of F. Okay, and now the 5/7 chord, I have my root, 5th, 3rd of the chord, and now the 7th. Okay, so I'll pull that same process. I'll pull that into the key of D minor now and start with a 5 chord as a triad, and then I'll make it a 5/7. So the 5 chord in the key of D minor is built on the note A. So I'll use the A in the bass here. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and double the root and the tenor this time. I'll put the 5th of the chord, the E in the alto, and then the 3rd in the soprano. I've got to make this into a leading tone. Remember, in order for this to be a true 5 chord, a major 5 chord, I have to make sure I take the 3rd of the chord, which is the 7th degree of the scale, and I've got to make sure that I raise that a half step, because a leading tone is not accounted for in the key signature for minor keys. So I've always got to take that leading tone and raise it a half step from its key signature position in order to make sure that I do in fact have a leading tone. So let's tonicize D minor now. So I built a 5 chord with the bass here, tenor, alto, soprano on that leading tone. So there's my 5 chord, and I want to go ahead and transform that into a 5/7. So when I was working on this in the key of F major, I found that I could transform the 5 chord triad into a 5/7 chord by finding the note in the 4-part texture that was doubling the root and then bringing that down a whole step. So I found that that was the case in the soprano. So I pulled the doubled C down a step into B flat. So I'm going to apply that same logic to the key of D minor and find the note that is doubling the bass or doubling the root of the chord and pull that down a whole step. So in this case, of course, it's happening in the tenor. So what I'll do is I'll take the A from the tenor and I'll move it down to a G. And now I've got a 5/7 chord. Okay, so again, to tonicize D minor, I've built a 5/7 chord by putting the root in the bass, the 7th in the tenor, the 5th in the alto, and of course that leading tone with a marked raised seventh in the soprano. So there's my 5/7 construction in D minor. So hopefully this gives you just again a refresher on how to build a dominant seventh chord or 5/7 chord in both major keys and in minor keys, with the special consideration that in minor keys we have to make sure we take that 7th scale degree and raise it a half step to form a leading tone.